Hello, I'm Paula Bolton, co-founder of Lesbian Labour. Welcome to our Proud Lesbian series. During Pride Month, I'll be interviewing a wide range of lesbians to gather lesbian perspectives and to hear about lesbian lives in 2022. And I'm really thrilled for my 15th interviewee. Here we have Lucy Masood. So welcome, Lucy.
Hello, Paula. How are you?
Okay, thanks. I'm looking forward to hearing your story. Could you start us off by talking to us about your life as a lesbian? How has it been coming out, etc.? Family, friends, you know, the whole thing.
My life as a lesbian has been quite, it's been quite active, really. Put it that way. I grew up abroad. I was kind of in between Libya and the UK, but mostly in Libya growing up. I've got a Muslim father and a Catholic mother, but coming out for me was actually quite uneventful. It was, you know, I hoped it would be far more dramatic than it was. I was kind of hoping for a big old bust up with the parents, but unfortunately nothing like that happened. So I came out at 16, I think. Yeah, well, I say I told my parents when I was 16. I'd known before then. I'd started to figure it out before then. But I told my parents in Libya when I was 16, I think, or 17. And my mum was absolutely fine about it. I know she knew already. She'd said that she'd always known since I was a 3-year-old, apparently by the way I walk. So Mother Masood had known a lot longer than I had that I was a lesbian. And, you know, in her words, it doesn't matter, I love you anyway. So that wasn't really an issue that I needed to deal with, thankfully. It was more just coming to terms with it myself. You know, I was in a country that didn't have gay representation at all. It was illegal. It just wasn't a thing. Even when I was in the UK back and forth, it wasn't even really so much of a thing in the UK. It wasn't so open. We're talking about the very early 90s. So you had your Martina Navratilova, you had Ellen, just about. So you had a few lesbian role models, but not anything near to the extent we have it now. And it was still a tough time, even in the UK. We didn't have equal marriage. That wasn't even a thought on people's mind. You know, we weren't even allowed in the army. People were getting thrown out of the army. So it was a tough time. It was regular for people to be walking along the street and be getting homophobic abuse thrown at them in the UK if they presented or looked like a lesbian. So it was more just kind of coming to terms with, right, so I like girls. What does that mean for me? I never felt ashamed of liking girls. It was more just the realization at quite a young age that, right, things are going to be difficult for me. Things are going to be more difficult for me. It's going to be more difficult for me to meet people because everyone around me was straight. So it was, right, this is going to be difficult. My life is just going to be a little bit more difficult moving forward. And there was no one who I was attracted to who was lesbian. So the people who I did know, who I did eventually meet when I was kind of 16, 17, 18, who were lesbian, they weren't sort of my type, so to speak. So it was like, right, I'm attracted to this kind of person, but there's none of those people around. Yeah, it's just, again, it was more, life is just going to be a bit more difficult. But then when I was 19, I moved to London to start university and discovered the gay scene. And then that was it. That was Lucy for a few years. Not too much university took place, but lots of lesbianism took place.
Yes.
So yeah.
What were you studying, Lucy?
Politics.
Right. Jolly good. Where at?
Greenwich okay. University. Yeah. So I did, believe it or not, get my degree in politics eventually. It wasn't easy. It's a difficult degree anyway, but with all the, lesbian in a lesbian sweetie shop going on, I wasn't really focused at all for the first. I wasn't focused at all. In my third year, eventually when I got to my third year, it took more than 3 years to get to my third year. But when I got to my third year, I was in a relationship with someone then, and it was quite a serious relationship. So I'd settled down by then.
Yes.
Yeah, first year.
There was a sweetie shop as you said, so this is, although there was Section 28, there was still an active scene, wasn't there?
Oh, massively so. Like coming to London, I remember my friend, my gay friend, because I was in Hall's residence, and there was we'd all kind of pile into the student union after classes, and there was a gay chap who was also in my Hall's residence, and we quickly realised we were both gay. He'd already been to Soho, I think the week before, the first week of uni. So he took me out to Soho. I'd never been to Soho before, and it was just magical. There was so many. We were talking 1997. There was so many gay bars and clubs in Compton Street and around Soho at that time. And I feel sorry for gays and lesbians who are coming to the scene now, because it's nothing like it was in the 90s. You're talking about a number of lesbian bars, Candy Bar, Vesper Lounge, First Out, all in a very short distance of each other. And then also you'd have club nights. And of those club nights, at least one of those club nights on one day, a Monday or Tuesday or whatever day, would be a lesbian night. So there was constantly stuff going on. If you're a lesbian, if you're a gay man, if you'd like to go to nights that catered for both, if it was more of a music thing, there was so much going on. And when you stepped into Soho, you were very, very aware that you were in a gay neighborhood. This was a gay area. You could hold hands, you could kiss people, you could do whatever. You stepped out of it and you didn't feel that safe. At the time I was living in Woolwich. And funnily enough, as grim as Woolwich was in 1997, there was a gay bar.
Wow.
I think, kept having its windows smashed. But there was a lesbian bar in Woolwich. And I later moved to Stoke Newington. And again, in Stoke Newington, on Stoke Newington High Road, I remember there being about 3 lesbian bars. There was Due South, there was some bar called Blush, and then there was another bar as well. But even though you had Soho, which was just mammoth with the amount of gay bars and clubs and different things going on, you also had lots of gay bars and clubs and nights happening throughout London. So it really was a brilliant time, actually, to be a lesbian in London. I don't know what the rest of the UK was like, but certainly in London, it just seemed at the time to me that everyone was gay. And if they weren't gay, they, would get drunk and be gay for a bit. It just seemed a very accepting time, which is odd, because there was still lots of homophobia going on. We still weren't equal in law, nowhere near equal in law. And of course, we know in 1999 we had the Admiral Duncan bombing. So there was, and there was still gay bashing going on. There was still massive issues. But as far as a community, we had a community, and it very much was about the community. We used to have gay pride. That the reason I moved to London was because I'd gone on a gay pride parade. When I was still at college. My friend had taken on a gay pride parade, and it was in London. And I think the march, I'd missed the march, but we'd gone to the park bit. So again, in 1997 and before that, and again, I feel sorry for younger people because they don't have that. They just there's the march and everyone goes to Soho. Well, actually, in the 90s and before that, you all went to a park and it was free.
Yeah.
And all the tents, you had the pop stars tent, you had the main stage, you had this tent, you had that tent. We had a bunch of gay people having a brilliant time. It wasn't run for commercial reasons. There was no, corporate event. It wasn't saturated with just the capitalism that you see now. It was just a big field full of gay people having a good time. Yeah. And I think in 1997, I think it was Hyde Park, but I can't remember. It was wherever it was a very big park. And I just had the best time just seeing all these different people who looked different. Some of them looked like me. Some of them looked like people who I fancied, and they were gay and they were lesbian. And it was just, right, I'm going to move to London. I'm not going to go to Wales, where I was meant to go to Wales, where I called up the university and the answer message was in Welsh. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to London. And that was the reason I moved to London. And to say it was just a very special time for me as a lesbian. Kind of, by the age of 19, I was fully accepting of being a lesbian. That wasn't an issue, but it was more like, right, I feel at home, I feel comfortable, and this is my community. And as I say, it felt like a community. I remember going to a few gay clubs and bars when, like, on my own during the summer of 97. Actually, it would have been 98. My gay friends had all gone, they'd left university and gone home for the summer, and I'd stayed in London. So I was on my own. I was going to these gay clubs completely on my own. And you just have these random gay men just come up to me and befriend me because they could see I was on my own, and they were just like, oh, you know, meet this person. And a lot of those are still my very, very good friends who I've known now for over 20 something years. And, you know, there was nothing in it for them. It was just, oh, here's a girl, she's on her own. Here's a gay person, they're on their own. Let's get her into the community, introduce her to everyone. So it got to the point where I was able to go to pretty much every, you know, main bar or main club. And people, and it didn't matter if I was on my own, because I'd walk in, I'd know people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a nice time.
Can I just say there's something pinging quite a bit. Do you know what that sound is? There's a
not me.
No, okay, never mind. Your voice is louder than it, so that's okay. Can I just ask you then, how did you move from your student life into your working life? What were the choices available to you, and how did that come about?
So when I finished university, I moved to Brighton and I did a postgraduate in journalism. It's only for a year. And then after I did that, I moved to Australia for a year and a bit. So whilst I was in Australia, I did a few temp jobs. I'd worked for American Express in Brighton part-time. So when I moved to Australia, I started working for the American Express in Australia. And then you have to keep swapping jobs every 3 months. So I just kind of jumped from job to job, and then came back to London. And when I came back to London, I was unemployed for a good couple of months, but my brother got me a job in the gym that he worked. So I started working for Fitness First as a sales consultant, salesperson. And then I quickly became manager of the sales team. I did that for about a year and then applied to the fire brigade. So I was kind of like, well, you know, I'm not, you know, working in a gym is all well and good, but it's not something I want to do long term. It's not something that I feel overly fulfilled about. I was earning decent enough money for my age, but I didn't feel like I was changing the world by selling people gym memberships, even if they were like massively fat. I wasn't, you know, wasn't having a day in society. So I applied for the London Fire Brigade. I'd always wanted to do law as well, but it just seemed totally out of reach. It's so expensive. It just didn't seem an option. So I applied for the fire brigade and got in first time. But from the stage of applying to actually starting, it was about a year's wait. So from the application form, going through all the different interviews and the fitness tests and stages and stages and stages, it was a year. So I started the fire brigade, I think in 2006. Yeah, just towards the end of 2006. So that was kind of my working life. So not too much from university to the fire brigade. It was probably about a 2-year gap, and one of those years I was studying.
So was there a preponderance of lesbians in any of the areas that you worked in? Because I mean that sounds all fairly random, but I've often wondered about the gym, you know, the fitness industry.
No, not really. In the gym I worked at, I'm pretty sure, well, I was certainly the only open lesbian.
Yeah.
No, I can't recall working with any gays or lesbians in the gym I worked at. It was in East London, it was in Leighton. And then with the fire brigade, it's I mean, at the time I started working there, I think it was 98% male.
Yeah.
So of those 2%, I'm sure some of them were lesbians, but I certainly wouldn't see them. I wouldn't see them on a day-to-day basis. I may do like a training course or something that was catered towards females, or the LGBT lot would put on something, and then, you know, obviously there'd be lesbians there, but generally no, I was just surrounded by men. Yeah.
So I was with Banner Theatre between 94 and 98. When I left, one of the plays that came straight after, this was a political theatre group based in Birmingham that used to tour the trade union circuit. And we did Black and White in the Red. And it was about sexism in the fire service. So I think that was probably just before just before you joined up, but shocking, absolutely shocking to the core of, you know, like you said, 98% male. Or what was that like? How was it for you as a woman, never mind a lesbian?
I mean, I'm quite, you know what I'm like, I'm a bit thick-skinned and I'm a bit kind of rambunctious, shall we say. But I was very much on the defensive as soon as I started. Like my training squad, I was on one training squad and they were lovely actually. And there was 2 other females on the squad, which made, I think there's about 17 of us, but there was 3 females, and that made it made a massive difference. But actually all the men on that squad were lovely. And then about 2 weeks in, I hurt my knee and I had to, I had to leave the course for about 2 weeks, and they put me on the course behind. That was a completely different story. It was all men. The first course I was on, and I don't know why it worked out that way, but pretty much everyone on the course were from London. So the second course I was on, there were only 2 of us who were actually from London. Everyone else had come in from London to do this, you know, to join the fire brigade. And it was just a very different atmosphere. It was just very different. There was a couple of people I got on with. There was a couple of people who were nice, but there was just this attitude with a lot of them, which was, well, you only got in because you're a female and they make allowances for females, or you only got in because you're black and they want more black people. And it's like, you know what, I did the same fitness test as you. You know, I did the same bleep test as you did to get in. But yeah, there was a few people on the course who just had quite grim attitudes. So it wasn't, my time at training school wasn't enjoyable. And a lot of them on my course were ex-military, and that really came through. But like I say, there was a couple of people who were lovely, were really nice, but it was just, I just didn't enjoy it. I mean, it was a tough course anyway. So I think it was like 4 or 5 months at training school. I can't remember. And it was winter, and it was just very claustrophobic as well, because you're having to work with these people very, very closely. And there wasn't really anywhere to go when you weren't training. Yeah, it wasn't an enjoyable time whatsoever. And there was never any thought in my head that I wouldn't complete it. It was more like, right, you know, I've started it, I have to finish it. But I assumed that when I got to station, when I got sent to my first fire station, that it would be the same as it was at training school, that I wouldn't like it and the people would be the same. Actually, when I got sent to my first fire station, my watch that I got sent to, which is a Hornsey white watch, were lovely. They were really nice. They really looked out for me. The other watches on the station, again, it was, from memory, I think I was the first female at the station. So they'd never dealt with a female before. A couple of years before I'd got there, there'd been a black firefighter and his fire gear had gone missing. And when they found it, someone had written "coon" on the back. But when I got there, I just kept finding, because I had my own dormitory and toilet, I kept finding like leaflets and stuff, just normal fire brigade leaflets with racist scribblings on, being purposely left in the toilet. And I know it wasn't people from my watch, I know that for 100%, but it was this kind of, I don't know, it was almost like they were very defensive of their watch and their fire station, and anyone new coming into it, anyone different, they saw that as a liability. So that by the time I got to my station, the rumour had gone round that had only been started, could only have been started at training school. The rumour had gone around that I was a journalist, that I was doing an expose on the fire.
Undercover.
Yeah, so I got there, so of course they're all on the defensive. None of the other watches really spoke to me at all. I'm quite arrogant, I didn't really notice for about 6 months that no one was speaking to me. But yeah, they'd all kind of made the collective decision not to speak to me. And there was a few times where they really dug me out. So for instance, if I'd taken my fire gear and everything off the fire engine and accidentally dropped a glove or something, anyone else, they'd pick up the glove and just go put it on their peg. With me, they would go and complain to the station manager, oh, she's dropped, you know, look what she's done. So they're really digging me out. But my attitude to that was, fuck it, right, what are you going to do? Fuck off, I'm not going anywhere. So when a few times people tried to have a pop at me, I would equally have a pop back and just tell them to fuck off. So I stood my ground. It was just annoying that I had to stand my ground.
Yeah.
With, different personality, would have been quite intimidated by. I'd say my watch were lovely, and I'm still good friends with them now. Some of them are retired. I'm still friendly with them. So I was there for a few years, and then I transferred to Chelsea Fire Station because I moved house. So I moved to the other side of London. So then I transferred to Chelsea, which was just a little bit closer to where I was living.
When you decided to, you said about when you were joining up, you talked about you weren't really changing the world at the gym. So at what point did you have a sense that you wanted to do something that was helping to change the world? And how soon did you get involved with trade union activity when you were a firefighter?
I'd always had the idea of being a firefighter since I was quite young. It was just something that I liked, the idea of helping people, but also working in the community, working in London. I'm not originally English, but I'm really proud to be English, and I'm really proud to live in London. And so it was that really appealed to me. And just the idea of mincing around in my little fire uniform.
Yeah.
I thought it might help my dating, which it did, to be fair. So the union stuff came because when you're a trainee firefighter, you're on what's called the book, and the book is your sort of training manual. And before you get signed off your book, when you get signed off your book, then you're like a fully fledged firefighter and you get a bit of a pay rise. But you're on your book for about 2 years. Most people are, and I was on my book for about 2 years. So you don't do anything whilst you're on your book. You just put your head down, learn, make the tea, get buckets of water thrown over you once in a while. It's like you're the buck. That's what happens. So I didn't really do anything for 2 years apart from my book. Once I was signed off, then I started to get involved more so on the LGBT side, because there was an LGBT group. So I was like, I'll find out what's going on with them. They used to have a few meetings, so I started going along to that. Then I found out that the chair of the LGBT group just wasn't holding meetings. He just wasn't doing anything. And it seemed like he was using it just to kind of progress his career a bit. And then it didn't even seem like he was necessarily going on strike when the rest of us were going on strike. So I let it be known that I was going to run against him. He stood down. I took over as LGBT chair and just got very involved. And from there, it had traditionally been that when they'd have regional meetings in the FBU in London, the LGBT rep didn't really do much or contribute much. They didn't even really turn up, but I would turn up, and I would kind of, but no, I've got as much right to be here as the rest of the reps, and I'm gonna have my say and put it forward. So I just started getting involved in that, and then also I got I became friendly with, I think, the regional secretary, a guy called Joe McVeigh, who I think now is a Labour councillor. So I became quite friendly with him. He started putting me on discipline courses, like FBU discipline courses. So I was learning that, learning other sort of trade union courses, and then carried on with that for a couple of years, and then ran for the position of treasurer became available, which is a senior position in London. It's on the regional executive. That became available because the chap retired. And I put it out there that I was going to run for that. Someone else put themselves forward. I wasn't the preferred candidate from the region, but I put the work in and I won the election, which pissed off a whole bunch of people. But the good thing about that, what I liked about it, is as much as there's sexism in the fire brigade and racism and homophobia, you had in London, which had probably got the highest membership of firefighters in London, you had a black lesbian female running against a heterosexual man, and they picked the best candidate. They didn't actually care if I was female, black, or whatever. They knew that I was bloody good at my job as a discipline rep, and they voted for me, and I won the election, which I'm really proud of. Yeah, I won it on merit, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm proud of my fire brigade colleagues, comrades, for picking me, because I was the best candidate. I was clearly the best candidate. Even though I wasn't the preferred candidate from the regional committee, he wanted the other chap, because he'd been there a bit longer, and he just ticked the boxes for them, and I was seen as possibly I could be causing trouble. when it went to the actual membership, when the ballot forms were sent out to the station, to the however many thousands of firefighters we had at station, 6,000 firefighters, they chose me. So good for them.
One thing is you have mentioned twice now in different phases that there was an LGBT group at uni, and LGBT was this. So was it LGBT by then? Has it always been LGBT in your work? Because this expanding acronym has been a real thing.
At university, I got involved in the student union, and it was LGB.
Yeah.
And I in the LGB rep. There was definitely no T, it was just LGB.
Yeah.
And the fire brigade, I think by the time I started, it was probably LGBT, but I remember going to a union school for LGBT. We called it gay school. It's like 4 days up north somewhere. We used to call it gay school. And they had the big sign, and it was definitely LGB because there was a trans woman there who kind of grumbled about it. Where's the T? So that would have been 2008. So at that point, it's still LGB.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was interviewing somebody that had been involved in setting up the Criminal Justice Board, the LGB Criminal Justice Board in London, but she added the T in 1996 because she was aware of some of the issues that weren't being dealt with, this, that, and the other, without thinking. It was, and so tracing how this acronym has expanded to its current state is quite an important part that's coming through this. So, right, I'm going to take you away from work for now. Lesbian social life and culture obviously has changed over time. You talked about the fabulous, early days in the 90s. And obviously Section 28 was repealed in 2000. What has happened since? And have you noticed a change in lesbian social life and culture? And where do you think we are now?
Oh, there's a massive change in lesbian social life and culture. I think not some for just reasons of society's changing. So whereas before, if I wanted to stand in a gay bar or in a bar holding my girlfriend's hand and giving me a kiss, I would only feel comfortable doing that in a lesbian bar. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that in a straight bar. I think times have changed. Certainly in London, I would probably feel comfortable doing that anywhere in London, in a bar in London. So I think there's not as much of a need for lesbians to go specifically to lesbian bars as much. And also you've got the apps as well. So people are meeting people on apps. But on the flip side of that, you are having lesbian, there are no lesbian bars in London. You have the she bar, as I call it, the flea bar, which isn't a lesbian bar because they let in men and they let in trans women who they say are lesbians, and the she bar acknowledges as lesbian. So I would say there aren't any lesbian bars in London at the moment. So you've gone from a time from the 90s where you had many of them and different nights, different club nights, etc. There's always something going on, to essentially you have nothing. You've got the basement of the flea bar and you've got, I think, the downstairs of GAY bar, and that's it for women. And of course, you've got the added issue of women not having female-only spaces, not being able to go to a female-only space and say that they're same-sex attracted. You've got that added pressure of being forced upon us, not by straight people, but actually by our own community, that we're told that biological men are lesbians and we have to accept them into our dating circle. And if we don't accept them into our dating circle, then we are bigots and we are transphobes. And that's fine for someone my age. I'm 44. I can tell someone to fuck off if they try and say that to me. And I will happily tell someone to fuck off if they say that to me. However, if you're a 16, 17-year-old lesbian who's just come out of the closet, she's going to a bar, a lesbian bar, or, with friends for the first time, she wants to fit in, she wants to build a friendship group, and she's surrounded by people and a community that are kind of forcing on her that, no, you can't be same-sex attracted, that's not allowed, that's bigoted. You have to be queer, you have to be open to the person, you have to be open to people of both sexes, or 58 sexes, or what, you know, whatever the trend is of the day, because to be same-sex attracted is wrong. So I think that's for me, that's the main difference. You know, in 1997, when I moved to London, though there was many issues going on, I felt perfectly safe to say to people that I was a lesbian, i.e. that I was same-sex attracted. And I felt confident that people would accept that, people would acknowledge that and say, yes, you're absolutely allowed to be same-sex attracted. Now, in 2022, I don't feel confident that lesbians are able to say that they are same-sex attracted. They're not able to say it because we have the people, the organisations that we would normally look up to, like Stonewall, and, you know, certain gay commentators who should be protecting young, especially vulnerable gays and lesbians, and should be fighting for their right to be same-sex attracted. Instead, they're throwing them under the bus and calling them bigots. And it is a form of coercion. I say it's very sinister. If you're saying to a lesbian, you cannot be same-sex attracted, that is wrong, that is bigoted, you should accept biological men into your dating circle, I think it's massively sinister, and I think it's rapey. And I don't apologise for saying it's rapey. And anyone out there, especially in the gay community, who tries to impose that on young lesbians, tries to impose this ideology that men can be lesbians, they should be utterly ashamed of themselves. And they should really reflect on the damage that they're doing, not only to the gay community as a whole, but to lesbians who are trying to come out of the closet and who are struggling with their sexuality and have enough to worry about, let alone being told by people who should be protecting them that actually, you know, you just haven't found the right man.
Which is as old as the hills.
Well, quite.
You know, it's corrective rape is what it is, basically. Yeah. So the representation issue, have you noticed that changing in films, TV, books? I mean, obviously, when you talked about coming out in London, you had in real life representation around you. Life is so much more online now, and you know, in the media. Have you noticed it changing?
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, I'm not up to date with all the newfangled TikTok, whatever it's called. You know, far too old for that. But what I am noticing is the appropriation of our language. You know, there's no longer lesbians on screen, there's queers on screen, which I find hugely offensive. Even our rainbow flag has been appropriated with this utter nonsense that keeps changing every other day of a flag that they present to us. But no, it's difficult. It seems to me that the people who I think are damaging to lesbians and the lesbian community, they're the ones who are the most vocal.
Yeah.
Whenever say if I'm on social media and there's, you know, say if you're following someone like, I don't know, Graham Norton or someone like that, the fact that they don't come out on the trans bandwagon, I assume that they're TERF, because everyone's quite happy to come out with trans women are women and men can be lesbians, etc. And it almost seems people are pressured into saying that, when clearly they don't believe it, but they're pressured into saying that. So for those gays and lesbians who don't say anything, who stay quite quiet on it, like you know, gay men, Graham Norton, etc. In my mind, it's like they're on board with us. They just can't say anything. So I don't think there's many. I'm probably the wrong person to ask about, you know, young role models and representation, because I'm not young. And
and that's the point, though. We all deserve representation. I never see a character. Never. I have never yet. What? Actually, that's a lie. That is a lie. When I was going to the Isle of Man the other year, I don't know how the hell it happened, but there was a telly in the corner while I was waiting for the ferry, and this woman on it was an ex-Greenham woman who was doing stuff, and it was, you know, it was a proper woman my age there who was working in something or other, and I just was riveted. because I'd never seen anything I could relate to. You know, I mean, it's a never. And what does that do to your mental health when you are completely invisible? You know, in certainly in mainstream media. And for you, obviously, you've got the additional thing as a Black woman of how infrequent, even if there is a lesbian in a series, how often is it a Black lesbian?
Yeah, no, I can't. I mean, I remember sort of 16, 17, 18. The film Bound came out. You remember?
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Apart from it being lesbian, it's not a lesbian film. It's a film. It's a crime caper film, actually. Yes. It just happens to have the characters in it which are lesbian, which I think makes the film so brilliant, because it's brilliant to watch as a lesbian, but also it's a bloody good film. And those lesbian characters could equally be heterosexual characters. Doesn't make a blind bit of difference to the storyline. But I remember that film, and let's just say it was very well worn in my yes. VHS player.
Watched it quite a few times, did you, Lucy? Yeah. Under the sink, yeah.
The local Blockbuster store would essentially I was just on a
borrow and return, borrow.
So I had that, and a few other kind of films at the time. Obviously, there was Beth Jordache in Brookside, was a little bit before my time. I was still in Libya when that came out. But there was, and no one remembers this, there was 2 lesbian characters in EastEnders. And funny you say about a Black woman, there was 2 lesbian characters in EastEnders. And I remember when I moved to the UK when I was 16, so I'd been back and forth, but I was actually moving to the UK. I arrived here and I was in Portsmouth, and I think it was the day before I started college, and my mum was due to go back to Libya, and we were watching EastEnders, first time in years. And there was 2 women, one was called Della and one was called Binny. And I think Della was Black, Binny was the white one. And they were a couple, and they snobbed. And I just remember watching it just like, oh my, and they were both quite feminine women as well. Just being utterly shocked, but in a very happy way. And I remember just like where we were, I was with my auntie, she had this rancid dog, and the dog just went ballistic and started like homophobically barking at these poor lesbians on TV. But I just remember thinking, wow, this actually happens. This is a thing.
Yeah.
There are women of different colours who, look at certain. It was, for me, it was just staggeringly unbelievable. And I wouldn't go as far as to say life-changing, but it just really gave me so much optimism. So much optimism. And seeing a Black lesbian on TV.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You exist. If you can see it, you can be it. So I'm aware I'm trying to keep you to time here. So I know we're hopping around a bit, but you're following, which is great. So I'm going to take you back to the fire brigade. So you must have had some overlap as a trade unionist with the Labour Party. How do you think they ever were? And how do you think they are currently with regards to lesbians?
Well, I've always been a member of the Labour Party since I was 16. And then obviously being in the FBU, and as I became more senior in the FBU, I became more involved with the Labour Party. FBU worked quite closely with the Labour Party in recent years. We did disaffiliate a few years ago, but then we reaffiliated when Jeremy Corbyn became leader. And I found, especially after Grenfell, the FBU were keen to sort of push me in front of the cameras because I was woman, I was Black, etc. It was good optics, I guess. And I was working quite closely with the community in Grenfell as well. So that made sense that I was the one who did a lot of the media on Grenfell. And I was being asked a lot by Labour to appear in their political campaigns. There was a political Labour Party broadcast that was on TV. I was in that. The TUC got me to do kind of an ad campaign about going on strike. So I was very much kind of flavour of the month for a period of time. Then I made the mistake of correctly identifying that there are 2 sexes. I know. And then it started to get a bit ropey. my colleague at the time, who was also a senior trade union official, Paul Embry, he was the one who actually first got me involved in the whole GRA reforms. I didn't really know too much about what was going on. I kind of just floated around, just ignorant to it all. And he had tweeted some obnoxious tweet about wanting to self-ID as Brad Pitt. And he'd got a whole lot of abuse. They tried to get him sacked. And I had a conversation with him about it. And he said, look, this is what's going on. And at the same time, I think it was the NEU were trying to discipline Kiri Tunks because she had set up Women's Place. So it was actually Paul Embry who told me about that and said, look, you need to reach out to her and offer your support because this is what's happening to her. So I did. And that's how kind of I first got involved with Women's Place. And I'd say from an FBU line in London, you had me as the LGBT rep, but you had me as a senior FBU official in London. And you also had Paul Embry as a senior FBU official. He was practically running the FBU in London. Right. I was helping him. And we only had 2 or 3 other senior officials who they weren't doing too much. So when I say I was able to put out statement after statement, gender critical statement. When your woman was bullied off the picket line, I put out a statement condemning that. So we were very, very gender critical in London. And we managed, when I say we, more Paul Embry actually, Paul Embry, who was the executive council member, he managed to kind of keep in line the national FBU. So when they were being pressured into, supporting Guff, and when they were going to the TUC conference and being presented with these ridiculous trans women are women and look at all these hateful TERF resolutions, Paul Embry was able to manage to keep the executive kind of sensible, where we abstained. Everyone else was voting for, FBU abstained. I think it was the TUC conference in 2018.
It was,
where,
indeed.
Yeah, there was a hideous resolution and everyone voted in favour apart from 3 unions that abstained. We were one of them. And that was, again, I think that was the influence of Paul Embry, and I would say probably the influence of me as well.
Yeah, that was that the imposition of self-ID upon the whole of the TUC Congress. Yeah. And there was you, the NUJ, and the probation, I think it was as well.
I'm not sure it was probation.
Oh no, educational psychologists.
That was the one.
That was it, yeah.
So we abstained. Then not long after that, I left to join the bar. I'm a barrister. Then Paul Embry got sacked for speaking at a Brexit rally. So we both kind of left at the same time. And then it all went to shit. And now you have the FBU have been completely captured, total embarrassment. You had one of their senior national reps, no platform, a gender critical woman at an event last year, ironically on free speech. He made sure that she was deplatformed. The resolutions that they're pushing through, just misogynistic beyond belief. But unfortunately, that's the TUC now. That is the union movement. Yeah. And what's happening is, so this year at conference at the FBU, I found out that a resolution was being pushed through, and it was a resolution that was condemning groups such as LGBT Alliance, Women's Place UK. And this had been voted through in London, FBU. So I said, right, I know people in London. So I contacted the LGBT group in London and said, when did this resolution come to you? When did you vote on it? And what were the votes? And they came back saying, first we've seen of it. So first you've seen of it, but you voted yes on it. All right, okay, that's not right. And they kind of ummed and ahed about it. But I established that the LGBT committee in London, which is the biggest LGBT FBU membership in the country, had voted yes on a resolution that their membership hadn't even seen. They hadn't even given it to their LGBT members. They just voted yes. It then went to the regional committee in London, same thing. Wasn't even sent out to the membership in London. They just voted yes on it. Now, if that's happening in London, which is very active, damn sure it's happening in the rest of the country. Yeah, so you're getting these LGBT committees who are pushing through these nasty, misogynistic, homophobic resolutions. It's not going out to your general membership. It's just getting ushered through until it gets to conferences, and then it's getting pushed through at conference. And we saw the disgraceful actions of Unison a couple of weeks ago. And this is happening time and time again. But if the unions aren't going to be brave enough to stand up for their lesbian members and their female members, then they've only got themselves to blame when they're hemorrhaging members, where they're losing money and they're losing support.
Yeah. And they are Labour losing women, Labour losing lesbians, unfortunately, which is why lesbian Labour, and we're trying to change it so that we can keep lesbians and women within the party, because something needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a member of the Labour Party. I'm fully expecting them to kick me out at some point, but I don't vote for them. So I'm a member. Didn't vote for them in the last election. Haven't voted for them in the local elections. And if the Labour Party can't get someone like me, a black female lesbian, to vote for them, they're in serious trouble. Serious trouble.
Yeah, and it's not as if your choice in that is unusual at the moment, Lucy. Would you say there's a whole swathe of very active women who are now politically homeless?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a swathe of non-active women who would just kind of, generally vote for Labour, who aren't voting for Labour, and then active women who aren't voting for Labour. And Labour are doing what Labour did during the referendum, which is they're only listening to their membership. They're only trying to appeal to their membership and not their electorate. So that's what they did during Brexit. They reached out to their membership. They'd right, this is what our membership is saying. The electorate, the red wall seats, the working class people who, for whatever reason, do want Brexit, they're stupid. We're not going to listen to them. They're a bunch of racists. We're going to ignore them, and we're going to listen to the Islington elite, as I call them. And that's what they're doing on this issue. They're not listening to their female electorate. They're not listening to the female trade union members.
Yeah.
They're just listening to this Islington elite woke set. Most, of course, men, mostly heterosexual, predominantly white, telling the Labour Party that women like me are bigoted.
Yeah.
Because of my views, because I don't want to have sex with a man, and I don't think men can be women.
Yeah. What would you advise Keir Starmer to be saying? What would his election pledge be on this that would get us all those votes back?
I would be advising Keir Starmer to say I resign, because he can't come back from the damage he's done. I mean, even just separately to this issue, advising MPs not to go on the picket line.
Yeah.
For shame.
Yes, and stop the war as well.
Absolutely, just disgraceful behaviour. I would be saying to him he needs to resign. I would be saying to any future leader, you need to step up and you need to be clear about what a woman is. You remember a month or so ago, when and it's interesting to see, because you'll remember, Paula, a couple of years ago, we couldn't get any publicity on this. We were crowing our heads off. Look what's going on, the GRA reforms. Yeah. None of the media outlets were interested. Now they can't get enough of it. And it's great to see every time you get a Labour politician being interviewed, whatever show it is, radio, whatever it is, they're always asked, what is a woman?
Yeah.
Can a man be a lesbian? Can a woman have a penis? And you just see them, the Labour MPs, squirming and not able to answer it. And unfortunately for the Labour Party, what you saw was Boris Johnson, who doesn't give a shit about women. He really doesn't. I'm sure he doesn't. Saw what was happening to Labour, saw that they were being destroyed by this subject, saw that they were hemorrhaging votes. He then goes on TV, gets interviewed with a smug look on his face, and gives the perfect answer, which is a woman is an adult human female, and no, women cannot have penises. And he was smirking. And you know why he's smirking? Because he knows he's just played a blinder.
Tick. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you'll have a whole load of women who will either vote Conservative, who haven't voted Conservative before, or like me, would never vote Conservative, but will stay at home and not vote Labour. Yeah. I don't say, I spoil my vote, I draw a big penis on it and write, women don't have penises. But voting Labour. Yeah. So they played a blinder.
Yeah.
So the next Labour leader, whoever it is, I can't even imagine who it would be, because it's all such a shit show at the minute. I can't think of one person who I think would do a decent job on this particular topic. But they need to be clear right at the beginning that they're not going to be bullied by the gender identity mafia. They're going to stop worshipping those morons at Stonewall, and that they are clear of what a woman is, which is an adult human female. That's what they need to do at the bare minimum. And they need to start repairing a lot of the damage they've done.
Yeah.
In regards to this.
And I think just to draw it to a close, I mean, you finally got to the bar, your law wishing to do that earlier. It was out of reach. It became within reach. So in your current work, do you believe that the legal scene has been captured as well?
There's attempts, yeah, to an extent. I mean, we saw what happened in the Forstater case, and I think that was partly due to what was called the bench book. The bench book is kind of this guidance that judges have. Yeah. And it appeared to have, and in the bench book, it essentially says a woman is whatever someone says they are, and you should, you know, treat them as such, etc., etc. And it appeared that the judge in the first instance at Forstater had kind of taken that guidance and used it as law. Yeah, I mean, I hope when I got to the bar that, because you're dealing with barristers, you know, barristers, we just deal with facts and evidence, and, you know, so I wouldn't have to deal with this nonsense of, you know, trans women are women, because we don't deal with fantasy. But no, you know, we're still dealing with the same bollocks. But of course, with barristers, they tend to be very sort of middle to upper class, very privileged, very white. Those people, whether they're barristers or not, but that demographic tend to be the people who are pushing this ideology on everyone else. But it doesn't really impact them. They're not ever going to have to worry about a sex offender, a male sex offender in a female prison, because they're never going to be in prison. They're not going to have to worry about a male in a female refuge, because they're never going to have to utilize a female refuge. They don't have to worry about this. So it's all very easy for them to push this trans, woke, progressive, #BeNice ideology on the rest of us, especially working class women, women of color, Muslim women who aren't going to be able to use changing rooms and gyms because there's men in there, Jewish women who no longer use the women's pond in Hampstead because men are now using it. So I guess it's not surprising that I'm seeing it at the bar, starting to get the odd email with pronouns at the bottom. But I'm self-employed now, so as most barristers are, and my chambers, you know, they let me get on with it and let me do and say what I want. So I'm still able to tell people to fuck off, and I'm still able to, I guess, unlike Alison Bailey, my chambers won't act as horrendously as her chambers did, and wouldn't be influenced by Stonewall. If they were, then I'd be out like a shot. I'd go somewhere else. But yeah, I think the bar needs to watch itself. We see the CPS seem to be captured, but I think it's definitely coming from this particular demographic. Because if you go to some private school and say Brighton, you're going to get a good chunk of the children there are going to be non-binaries and pansexuals and all the rest of it. If you go to a school in a state school in Tottenham, you're not going to see that. You're not going to have that, because, you know, lo and behold, working class people have better things to do than indulge their children and, you know, try and convince the whole world that their children are special and their children are this, that, and the other. So it's I've always said it's very much a class issue. It's very much a middle grade.
Just to counteract that, just to finish, I mean, I'm here in Corby, which is a small working class town in the Midlands, but the schools in this town who have had mermaids in are all exhibiting. There's 20 out of 30 kids in one of the schools identifying as something or other. You know, it's a direct causative link between the gender ideology being taken into schools and what the kids now think. So thank you for all the work you've done to counteract that, and I know that you are not laying down that mantle for some time, that you'll still be there at the forefront. And
well, Stonewall have their way, you know. We know Stonewall aren't too keen on black lesbians, so
yeah. Well, there you go. But thank you very much for being such a proud lesbian as well, Lucy. You're a great role model, and I look forward to sharing this with other people so that they can hear your story. Thanks very much.
Take care.